As the fog of the 2020 elections slightly begins to lift, we can start to see more and more the abstract shapes of division. Get your coffee. I'm a dad. Honestly, that may be one of my favorite identifying characteristics. I have 4 kids, 2 boys and 2 girls. Yes, there really only are 2 sexes, no gender confusion here. When you have 4 kids, there is hardly a day that goes by that you don't hear some version of World War III happening somewhere in the house. Especially during this COVID season we've been living through, where my kids' education is now happening at home and I'm working from home. So the chaotic sounds of battle, the screaming, the thumping, the fighting, arise sometimes multiple times a day. And when those sounds do arise, the peacekeeping force of dad has to move in. And when I am moved to engage with my diplomatic dad actions, there's always an initial assessment of the situation, which typically begins with the opening question, what on earth is going on here? Inevitably, at that point, the finger pointing and the hysterical answers, always pointing to the other guy, come. It was his fault. It was her fault. She did it. It wasn't me. It's always the other guy. Where do conflicts and disputes come from? That really is a good question, especially when you look at the conflicts, disputes, and division happening in our own nation right now. The eyes of not just Americans, but millions of people around the world are centered on the conflict playing out in the 24-hour news cycle of the DSA. That's the Divided States of America. So where do conflicts and disputes come from? Again, really good question. Is there a good answer? Actually, I think there is. And it is a fascinating answer. The question itself is posed by the Apostle James in James chapter 4, and he follows it up immediately with an answer, which could actually be summed up in just one word: hedonism. I'm not joking. That's the answer. Where do conflicts and disputes come from? They come from your hedonistic desires in conflict with someone else's hedonistic desires. You want your pleasure, delight, enjoyment, and tastes to be satisfied, and I want my pleasures, delights, enjoyments, and tastes to be satisfied. And there's a good chance that one of us is going to have to capitulate, and one of us is going to have to lose so that the other can win, and that sucks. So we're going to fight. And I don't have the time or the patience for compromise. So James says, you lust and you do not have. You murder and covet and cannot obtain. You fight and war. Yep, and yep. Think about it. All of the conflicts and disputes you have with your spouse, with your parents, with your siblings, with your coworkers, neighbors, or friends, your zeal for your wants, tastes, and desires are centrally responsible for the fight. It just is what it is, and it will remain that way as long as we are centrally and arrogantly focused upon our wants, tastes, and desires. But here's the important lesson. God resists the proud, but he gives grace to the humble. As long as we are arrogantly and proudly committed to our hedonistic desires, holding our ground in the situation, we will constantly find ourselves in conflict. But when we submit ourselves to God, when we humble ourselves before him, it is he that pours out blessing as he exalts those who humble themselves in his presence. Something to ponder as we find ourselves posturing for the next battle. We'll see you next time.